If Congress does nothing in 2033, the law would dictate a 25% cut of benefits to current beneficiaries. Does anybody here on the pod think that's ever going to be allowed to happen?
All right. Welcome to CBS Spotlight. If you were here by mistake, you are in the right place now. This is the podcast that's all about the often forgotten insurance toolbox and how it's there to support you, the advisor, and the RIA in building and protecting your clients and their legacies. I am Michael Corman, and I am with Eric Alvarado.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And we are your friendly neighborhood guides through this world of insurance and risk management. Today, we are joined by the Chief Advocacy Officer at Finseca, the one and only Armstrong Robertson himself. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great pleasure to join you.
Oh, thank you. By the way, did I miss anything?
No, I don't know how much your audience knows about Finseca. We joke, what's a Finseca? So we are a professional society that represents holistic financial advisors. We know that consumers get better outcomes when they cover all three legs of the stool, right? Which is investments, retirement income planning, also done commonly by annuities, and life insurance. And we have independent research from Ernst & Young that validates the experience of our members. They Monte Carlo'd it 1,000 ways, and people who have all three, because they have mitigated some of their risk, they get better outcomes in life and in legacy.
Awesome. So wait, what were the three legs of that stool again?
Investments, retirement income, and life insurance, permanent life insurance.
Interesting.
And so you manage the sequence of returns, you manage your longevity risk, your mortality risk, and you get a smoothing effect that a traditional investment-only approach with equities and bonds can't do on its own.
Oh, man. We're getting into the good stuff right away.
Well, Michael, I'm sorry. I'm nothing if not passionate about this. So,
hey, I like it. Subtle as a sledgehammer. Works for me.
Yeah.
That may be a problem in my upcoming review. We'll have to see.
I won't say anything.
Fingers crossed. So, Army, what are the current laws, estate tax wise, currently, and how did we get here? Maybe set the table by describing, where we are and how we arrived where we are.
Sure. I think everybody knows. Well, maybe everybody doesn't. In 2013, they wrote a permanent tax bill that involved an estate tax compromise, wealth transfer compromise, that set the exemption levels at 5.5 and 11 million individual and married, indexed for inflation. There are other details there in that deal, which we consider the crown jewel gold standard of deals in this space in the last 5 decades. But unified lifetime giving, there were a bunch of different elements to it, but it was something people could plan around. And that's what Finseca believes is folks engaged in the wealth transfer conversation need to know what they're planning against across years, decades, and sometimes generations. I mean, that is sort of the essence of it, right? So if the target moves all the time, we know for a fact it causes delay. In 2017, in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there was a real movement around repeal of the estate tax. There's still that's sort of like Republican lore amongst Republican lawmakers. But the ultimate end result of the 2017 bill was they temporarily doubled the exemption amount from the indexed 5.5 and 11 to 11 and 22. And I keep saying the word indexed because it's actually fractionally higher every year. And I don't keep track of the fractional increase, right? But it is a little bit higher than 5.5, 11 and 22. So what happens at the end of next year? Many of our listeners will know the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act included a lot of big tax reform, biggest tax reform since 1987. But some parts were made permanent and some parts were temporary. And the parts that are temporary are on the individual as opposed to corporate side of the code. So that doubled exemption amount, 5.5 and 11 index, which is now 11 and 22, if Congress does nothing on 12/31 of next year, or 1/1/26, the exemption reverts to what it was set at in 2013. So it's 5.5 and 11 on the index. Does that make
Oh,
sense? Was I totally confusing?
no, that makes sense.
No, it
But
makes absolute sense.
that
Yeah.
drop goes down quite a bit for people that might like once had an estate planning issue or didn't have one, really have an issue now. Did I
That's right.
understand that correctly? Okay, cool. Okay, so what I'm gathering, Army, so the sunset, is this just the estate tax? Is that all that's changing, or is more else going on with this?
Oh, no, it's a big deal, Michael. I was with a bunch of members of Congress this week, and the way they are thinking
Hmm.
about it, I know I'm jumping ahead to some of your later questions, but the way they're thinking about it in July 2024 is if Congress does nothing, no matter who wins the election, if Congress does nothing next year, the American people face a $4 trillion tax increase. So Republicans and Democrats have differences about how to react to that. But even the Democrats, President Biden would say and has said, like, he wants to protect the tax cuts for all those people who make $400,000 or less, and then increase everybody else's taxes. So the Republicans start with, we want to extend it all. Democrats want to extend parts of it. But just like we saw, the Bush tax cuts of 2001 and 2003 expired in 2011 and 2013, right? And even at that time, there was a lot of bipartisan agreement about extending the tax cuts, right? And so that's very much similar frame. Like, there will be some extension or a punt that protects a lot of people. The question is who and how much, and that's, in my world, why we play the game.
Okay, and out of curiosity, that tax increase is coming from that sunset on the estate tax, or where's that tax increase coming when that sunset occurs?
So it's the salt cap expires. Capping your salt deduction at $10,000. The individual marginal rates expire. The 199 cap A small business or QBI deduction, 20% for pass-throughs, that expires. The estate tax pieces expire. There's like a whole list of things that expire. Basically, the non-corporate, non-international stuff all expires. And so politically, what they did was they said, we don't know who's going to win this election in 2024, but no matter who wins, do you want to increase taxes on individuals and families? Probably not. So you're going to get some kind of extension, is a bit of the logic of the 2017's construction.
Okay, that makes sense. So, Army, what would you say to a client that's under the impression that the estate tax just won't be a problem?
Oh, Michael, it's been repealed 7 times and it always comes back. Or let me introduce you to my friend Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, I mean, short of amending the United States Constitution, it's always going to come back. And I think that's before you even get to the debt and deficits, right? I mean, I think there's a high probability that this conversation will increase despite the trend of the last. I think that client is looking at the 2000 to 2024 trend in which exemptions have gone up, and in some cases substantially. Like in 2000, they were like $1 million. So it's gone up a lot, and a lot fewer people face this reality. But look at the fiscal health of our nation, and do you think taxes are going to go up or down in the future? I worry they're going to go up a lot. And so you want to prepare early and think these things through. And the cost of delay when you're doing insurance protection, right? A lot of that comes back to your health. So you're clearly both young men, or you've aged better than I have. But it's cheaper to buy your insurance today than it will be when you look like me.
And one thing I've noticed too is that, with that exemption, I mean, it's, have you ever seen it as high as it is currently? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's ever going to be as high as it is now, right? Outside of those repeal years.
Well, yeah. I mean, the last repeal year was 2010. George Steinbrenner's family got pretty lucky that year. But yeah, it's it's never been as high as it is today. And listen, like there are a lot of Republicans in elected Congress who still believe in repeal of the death tax. But what Finseca said, because our policy is we want durable things people can plan against, right? Give us consistency, and we can then do what needs doing for clients to protect them and their families. I think but when they doubled it, which is ultimately where they came out in 2017, since then, look at the Democratic proposals: repealing step up in basis, taxing capital gains at death, lowered exemptions, graduated rates in the estate tax, reforms of grantor trust and other trust vehicles that would have led to massive new taxation. So there's all this increased focus. Ron Wyden and his team, who's the Senate chairman of the Finance Committee, they've written a bunch of reports on wealth transfer policy in America, and they are looking really closely at this because their notion, and Ron Wyden says this, is the wealthy don't pay their fair share, and they want to treat wealth like wages, or end what they call buy, borrow, and die. Right? So like there's a whole bunch of dynamics here. I would say the lack of a strategy is not a strategy. So if you're just betting that it'll all be okay, I don't think that's going to work out very well for you.
So, okay, wait, I'm catching, we're on the clock then. It's not just clients need to have a solution prior to a decision being made, because the tax code functions proactively rather than reactively most of the time, right?
That's generally how Congress does it. Across the spectrum, they generally don't change the rules about what already happened. So if planning is done early, most of the time, not 100%, but 99% of the time, you're going to be grandfathered and what you've done holds out. And, we were talking before when President Biden was elected in 2020 and came in and they were going to do tax policy in 2021. Some of you may remember that Build Back Better bill that they were talking about all summer. When that was first introduced by Richie Neal, the then chairman of the Ways and Means Committee from Massachusetts, there was a lot of wealth transfer policy in the original draft of that bill. Now, it never ended up becoming law. But I could tell you in talking to my members and friends in the profession, if you didn't already have your trust and estates attorney on retainer by the time that happened, getting one between September and December of that year was nearly impossible. Like there are not enough lawyers to do all the work that once a crisis comes. So plan early.
Oh, all right. Thank you for that.
So, Army, are there any political shifts that could, significantly change the range of outcomes, with the estate tax and legislation?
Millions of people, millions of Americans are going to go vote this year, Eric. And that's going to change what the outlook looks like. So here's my PSA. Your vote matters. I don't care where you live. It matters. Stand up and be counted. Please go vote. Cast an informed vote, but get in the game.
Love that.
The presidential may come down to 7 states, but that analysis relies on all the rest of us doing what we're supposed to do. And if we don't, we do something else, then it'll change the states. And, I can show you hundreds of examples where small numbers of votes made all the difference. So stand up and be counted. But billions of dollars. Kamala Harris, as we sit here on Wednesday afternoon, Kamala Harris has raised $100 million since she was the vice presidential or became the presidential nominee. So much money will be spent in this election. Wow. And so many votes will be cast in so many different races. But when I get paid on your behalf by Finseca to prepare, not to predict, right? So we've got problems and opportunities with Republicans and Democrats. Since coming here in 2017, I've done tax reform, I think at least twice, one under all Republican rule, one under all Democratic rule, and we got challenges and opportunities in both. Like we are agnostic. We are for members of Congress who advocate financial security for all, and that's a bipartisan issue. So when I distill all that down, blah, blah, blah from DC, we get the Peanuts parents talking like, rah, 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 right? So the cut through the noise is this. You get one of 3 outcomes to the election that set the agenda. You get all Republicans, you get all Democrats, or you get divided government. And that tells us a lot, not everything, but tells us a lot about this risk profile around key issues. So most Republicans are pro repeal of the death tax. Most Democrats are wealthy don't pay their fair share. And so those dynamics play differently. But as we've already covered in today's podcast, how permanent and durable are any of these changes is something you've got to weigh against it. So when does the crystal ball get clearer? November 6th. November 5th is election day. November 6th, we'll start to have some clarity around this. But just beyond this window, we've talked a lot about 2025. The insolvency of Social Security, as an example, is no longer a next generation issue. If Congress does nothing in 2033, the law would dictate a 25% cut, 20 to 25% cut of benefits to current beneficiary. Does anybody here on the pod think that's ever going to be allowed to happen? Of course not.
Not with the current way people vote in America.
Yeah. No chance. I don't care who's president. Like, there's no chance that happens. But at the same time, our debt to GDP, wow, that's a tongue twister. Debt to GDP ratio may be approaching 130%. So like 1 + 1 = 7. What's going to be the outcome? Are taxes going up, Michael, or are they going down?
I'm more inclined to think they're going up.
They're going up.
That's fair.
At some point. So plan early, plan ahead. But that was a lot of Washington speak, Eric. The short answer to your question is things get clearer November 6th.
Perfect. Yeah. So then, to help combat all of this, is Congress doing any meaningful work on this yet?
Michael, they are. One of the things that political and advocacy professionals talk a lot about is the image of Congress is old and stays there too long, and nobody really likes them. And there's some truth to that imagery, but there is also been a ton of turnover. So there are 435 elected members of the House of Representatives, 100 senators, of course. On the Ways and Means Committee, where the House writes tax policy, there are only 5 members left who were there when they wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So in just 7 years, 68% of the Republicans on that committee have turned over. That's stunning. And so a lot of the work that's going on now is turns out the Ways and Means Committee is not full of tax lawyers, and I'm not sure that would be a better result. But they got to learn how these policies that all intersect impact people, right? And so, Jason Smith, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee from Missouri, launched these tax teams where he's assigned different groups of members, different areas of policy. A Finseca board member, Tim McGuire, was up in Pennsylvania doing one of the sessions with the Working Families Group that Brian Fitzpatrick is chairing on Monday morning, talking about the impact of working families and financial security. So they're trying to get educated. They're drafting ideas. I mean, the Republicans, they want to go fast. If Donald Trump wins the White House and the Republicans win the House and Senate, I was in a meeting last week with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson's team, and they were like, 50 days. We'd like to be done in 50 days. So January 21st, 50 days later, is they can be done. Now, listen, you want to bet the over on Congress's deadlines, right? Always take the over where Congress is concerned. But the risk profile, the risk profile is how fast could they go? Because I got to be ready if they're going to, and so I got to plan for the Republicans want to go fast if they win it all. And that means they could be done by Memorial Day of 2025. But as I say, take the over, especially in divided government. Right?
Crazy.
Safe bet. But still, that's really good advice. Thank you, Army. So this was mostly an estate tax conversation, but as we're thinking about tax consequences for our clients, what else should we be keeping our eye out on?
I think it's a smart forward look question, Michael, and we've touched on it a couple times. One, are taxes going up or down? I think given the fiscal health of the nation, you got to bet at some level they're going up. But I'd say the other thing, as I watch the progressive movement in America and the tax debates of the last several years, is this notion of the wealthy don't pay their fair share and what ways should they pay more? In the retirement security discussion, which is traditionally treated by Congress as separate from the tax reform piece, Ron Wyden, the chairman of the Finance Committee, argued that there should be a limit to how much 401k deferral any American should have. And he said he set the limit at $5 million. Right. That's not law. That's his idea, but he's a very influential and powerful member. And so he said, his idea is if, Eric, you have raised $5 million, or if you've saved $5 million in your 401k, that's enough. You should be happy, and we should end the amount of tax deferral you get at that point. So these ideas they're not at risk of becoming law tomorrow. But I think depending on the audience's client base, these are things you got to watch and think about. And that's why the CBS Spotlight is such a valuable tool. But, I'll toot my own horn. That's why I think Finseca membership is also valuable, because we keep you super closely connected to these things.
True.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Army, we quickly touched on, the big announcement last week that Biden was not going to run again next year. With that in mind, what does that mean now having Kamala Harris in place as opposed to, having Biden there?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things. A really smart question, Eric. I think there's a lot we don't know, but here are a couple things we do know. Joe Biden served in the Senate for decades. He fancies himself, and there's a lot of evidence to support this, a really accomplished legislative deal maker who wanted to come to compromise in the right result. But as the whole conversation this summer has been his age and what generation he's from, Vice President Harris is 59. So it's a full 20 years back, and she is definitely cut from a more progressive cloth. And so her ideas, at least when she ran for president last time, were, if Joe Biden was, it's all a spectrum, right? I'm not casting judgments, but if Joe Biden was more moderate than the progressive wing of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, definitely Vice President Harris is on the more progressive end of things. Now, ultimately, what is the law of the land? It's what 5 Supreme Court justices say, or it's what the votes in Congress will carry. So even the president has some limited impact, but she will definitely start, I think, at a more progressive frame than Joe Biden does. And, like I said earlier, Finseca, we don't have an opinion on the presidential. As an organization, we will work with whoever the voters choose. And there are risks and opportunities with either. But that's the analysis, I think, in terms of what we know now, is Senator Harris is more progressive than Joe Biden.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with us, Army. I really appreciate it. Do you have any closing comments for the audience?
Eric and Michael, thank you so much. And thank you to CBS Spotlight for having me. This is a lot of fun. You could tell I'm enthusiastic about these subjects. And I would just, plug for Finseca, right? If you want to learn more about us, we're at finseca.org. We are not a diet grapefruit beverage. It's FINSECA.org. We try to give this kind of information to our members on the cutting edge. And we're pleased with how much partnership we've got with CBS Brokerage, and that's a great thing. But clearly this audience is bigger than that. So if you'd like to learn more about us and our upcoming meetings or our value prop, please check us out on the web or feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Army. And for everyone out there, I'm Michael Corman, and I'm with Eric Alvarado. Perfect. And this is CBS Spotlight. Your friendly conversation about insurance and wealth advising come together. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all next time.